Hello everyone, welcome to this episode from Jeem, the Center for Arab American Studies podcast. I'm Sam Al-Maligi, Director of the Center for Arab American Studies, and today we are very privileged to have on campus Al-Juthoor group, and they will be talking to us about dance and culture and the significance of dance that will be overestimated, and particularly as part of our Arab heritage, and we will be learning a lot about that from the group. And let's get started. I have like 5 or 6 people in front of me, so this will be a really interesting conversation.
Hi, Wissam. Thank you for hosting us. My name is Wa'il Al-Bahisi. I am a member of Al-Juthoor. Al-Juthoor meaning roots. We are a Palestinian folk dance troupe, particularly in the art form of Dabke. Dabke is a collective Arab, particularly Levantine and perhaps Iraqi group line dance. That's at least its major form. I am one of the early founders or first founders of the group about, say, 17 years ago now. Started in San Francisco. Most of us are in the East Bay, living in East Bay of California, Oakland, and that area. And we practice also in Oakland. The group started when it started basically to represent not just Palestinian cultural dance, but also Palestinian identity, trying to connect Palestinian diaspora to our roots in the homeland. And also we speak up for our people and our resistance and our connectedness to our roots and our land. And that reflects in what we perform, the songs that we choose to dance to, the lyrics, the movement, and also the places we go to. We perform a lot in the schools to educate Arab and Swana children and youth about their heritage and about this dance, but about their cultural identity in general. We perform in rallies, protests, Arab cultural events, and so on. So
This is really interesting. And the question is for all of you. Thank you so much for the introduction. How do you see art connected to diaspora? How do you see art connected to migrants, to first, second generation immigrants? How do you see that part of being an Arab American? If anyone wants to answer that, you can say your name and then go ahead. I'll just pass this on.
I'm Leila Mirae, and I am a member of Al-Juthoor and also a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley. And I study the role of the arts and culture, and as well as in resistance. I think that not only is it hugely vital in terms of preserving our roots, but also in keeping alive, our desire to return. So we often see culture and the arts, they try and divorce them from one another, but they are inherently political, because what we do is, by continuing these forms, we insist that we keep our roots alive and that those roots return back home at some point. That's a massive part of it. But also, if we look at other movements, in resistance movements or in cultural ties, the arts are one of the biggest lifebloods for keeping something alive.
You talked about art and resistance. Do you see dance, because dance is normally considered something that is very visual, but it's also something that is very kinetic. There's a lot of movement in it. And compared, for instance, to art and resistance, sense of painting or graffiti, what is very distinctive about dance as far as resistance, for instance, is concerned?
My name is Yasmin Aoude, and I'm also a member of Juthoor. This really connects to what Leila was bringing about how people often try to separate resistance and culture, but they are inherently linked. So many political factions in Palestine in the 60s and 70s had Dabke groups embedded within them, because they saw that not only the preservation of our culture, but being proud of our culture and having a space to really show it in a proud way was important. And it's linked to our path of resistance and staying and keeping our culture alive and living with us. And then also, because of that legacy and history, Dabke groups were often persecuted by the Zionist entity. So Fanoon, during the first and second Intifada, many of their dancers were imprisoned because of the work they were doing, because it spoke about resistance and return, and our culture is constantly, that's what it uplifts.
Thank you. And you said you've been to different places, all over the place. Have you ever performed overseas at all, or what about here in this? What states or what places do you have memorable experiences in?
we haven't traveled much, really. This is kind of one of our first, probably unique experiences. and we look to do more. I mean, the group, I think, is still evolving and it will continue to evolve. We've traveled around the Bay Area. We went to Southern California, participated in Palestinian cultural events and political events. PAWA, Palestinian American Women Association, one come to mind a couple of times. Always, regardless of the place, I think going to a venue where there is a school, where there's a different audience every time. There is school children, or there is a collective of Arab communities in the Arab Cultural Festival every year, or Palestine Day, where you see like people from different ages, different walks of life from our community coming, and how strongly they identify with seeing us. People come in and like they're looking for that kid. They're really inspired by it. What I think is that people see themselves in the culture and the dance that represents them, and they feel empowered by it. And we feel that, we feed off of it every time when there's a receptive audience.
Do you feel that dance is something that is not represented well, but Arab dance in particular, is not really well represented in the cultural scene compared to things like, I don't know, graphic novels, visual arts, film?
I can just briefly say that my answer is no. I don't think so. I think it's often commodified and sampled in ways that do not serve what our community would like to see represented. But I think we have people who can speak more to that. Sure.
Yeah, I would love to speak to that. My name is Al-Juthoor, dancer also with Daring Dances and Arab Amp and the Arab American National Museum. So I'm kind of like a connective tissue of sorts, both between dance and organizing and the movement at large, and also between regions. And I think like the role of dance as played out by Al-Juthoor in their home region in California is like really enacting like the power of dance and like what dance can do to bring people together and to like put bodies on the line and that like visceral call to action. But what I see regionally with dance, especially Arabic dance and Debke in particular, is that, yeah, it is very much commodified. It's very much like it defaults to entertainment, or it defaults to fun, and it really undermines the power of what dance actually was formed to do. In this area in particular, like in Dearborn, I was raised here, so I know like a bit, but obviously it's changed over the years. I've been in the Bay for a while, but I think there's other art forms that are very much more primary here in terms of like serving the movement and serving the justice agendas and the cultural agendas, and dance is sort of like it just defaults to something else, and so I want to like inspire a more powerful conversation, really.
Can I add to that?
Yes. This is Layla.
Yes. I often say that dance can be resistance, but that doesn't mean that all dance is resistance. So I think that we can look at regionalism, but we also have to look at trends that play out on a global scale. For instance, when the PLO really mobilized the Debke as a form of resistance, one of the first things that the US did was kind of throw money at Jordan to perform Debke in a way that made that art form impotent, so that it was more of a cultural celebration and no longer something that had any like political like spirit to it. And so in the same way we see that done here. There's that we have to be wary of, that isn't just privy to the regionalism, but is also reliant on global factors. But we also have to acknowledge that the way that the body is perceived in the West and also in the Middle East is different. So working with something like the body can be seen as really frivolous, and it's easy for us to kind of throw away as being something that doesn't matter, but clearly it has a huge political potency to it. And yet we do see these movements that say, dancing is something that is vain or whatever that may be. And so sometimes it is taken for granted, but one of Israel's biggest cultural exports is the arts, and that's because they use dance to wash over what they do and also create origin stories. So they know that it's a powerful tool for them to use, so we have to know that it's a powerful tool as well.
I think you mentioned something interesting over here, and we can talk forever about cultural appropriation, but I think dance is definitely one aspect of this. And you mentioned also going back to the Middle East, to Swana. I mean, a better word for the Middle East, in my opinion. But anyway, how do you see dance differing here how is it different here from dance basically back home or like in Arabic speaking countries? From movies, from videos? How is it, do you struggle with that, like the perception of this differently? Or is that something that you have not come across?
I can speak a little to that. I mean, recently we had a visiting really prominent troupe come here, and we had a workshop with the privilege of meeting them. فرقة الفنون الشعبية الفلسطينية, the most prominent dance troupe in Palestine. And we met a few people, and then I had someone kind of remind me that nobody cares about Dabke back home. And what he meant by that, I guess that's not exactly what he said, but he said, or at least what he meant to say is like, people take it for granted. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, Shabab, Sabai are not going around looking for Dabke troops to join. Like, it's there. There are people who are interested, people who watch it. They take it for granted, while here, we're looking for dancers and people to recruit all the time. So it is perceived differently in that sense. Here, there's sort of a cultural kind of treasure that people kind of discover, and they want to draw from and join. And that's the one thing I can think of.
I can speak to the other side of it. I'm Wasim Al-Haj. I'm also with Juthoor. I would say just like among diaspora Arab American, there is this kind of cultural treasure of dance, of all the different kinds of arts, right? Of singing, of whatever that we hold. There is something I think about dance that does have a particular element of accessibility to it that, for example, like singing or writing or poetry might not have to the average Arab American because their language skills aren't developed enough for that art form, right? They might not be able to speak or read or write Arabic to the level that they could master, like Arabic poetry, for example. You don't really need to speak. We have dancers in our troupe who don't speak Arabic at all, right? Because of that, I think that Dabke then is a way to connect to the cultural heritage, the language, the music, the art, the community, without needing that one aching bit of thing that causes so many Arab American kids in diaspora, that anxiety, right? That the language was never properly passed along, or various parts of our culture were never properly able to be passed along because of the nature of this diaspora. It's a young diaspora and very recent migrations caused by U.S. militarism and all the racism and violence and repression that comes with that. Just with all of this, there is that kind of self-consciousness, I think, with Arab Americans about being Arab enough. But I think Dabke does provide this very, as you say, kinetic, fun kind of way to access the form that doesn't require that sort of education.
This is very interesting. I mean, you're looking at dance here as a language in its own right, maybe. It doesn't have to replace language or Arabic, but it is a language in its own right. In that sense, I mean, or art can be different languages, and that's where the connectivity comes in. I want also to welcome Professor Rifat Dika, Professor of Arabic. He's joining us, also asking questions and interviewing. Would you like to have a question for the group, if you want to?
I enjoyed the session. I watched the group rehearsing, and I asked one question about if there's a basic structure of Dabke that we like, which is like universal, and we work on it. And Soraya, she answered that question.
Oh,
and if you could elaborate more about it, I would appreciate it.
Sorry, what is
thank you for everything.
Oh, yeah.
Would you describe Dabke as having these sort of core vocabulary, core steps that then when we see the performances happen, what we're seeing is like variations on these themes? Like would you describe it that way, or is that like specific to Palestinian Dabke, or does like Palestinian Dabke, Lebanese Dabke, like they all have the same core steps? I'm curious about that.
Well, the first thing I'll say that Palestinian Dabke is the best.
Say it again.
I say this with knowing with like our group has always had Lebanese and Syrian and Egyptian people, but I kid, and I've never been able to answer the question to the specific question of how different Palestinian and Lebanese and Syrian, Jordanian Dabke. I can describe it maybe in some form or the other, but They're very, very strongly related. I mean, there are the variations in form, but you see the general typical form with the line dance, right? And then the dal'ona form. This is very, very common in the Levant. But there is a wide kind of overlap in the form and the steps and the movements. There are variations. And I think this is a research that's waiting to be written or explored by somebody. But also, like, I think it's important to know that what passes now as Dabke groups is not really, like, what we do is not strictly Dabke all the time. And we try to draw from other experiences from groups like Al-Funun and Wishah. They call themselves dance troops. So they use the Dabke kind of core form, but they expand on it. They use a lot of the footsteps that comes in Dabke, and they build a lot of movement and kind of choreographies and tell stories through it, and incorporate music and more costumes. So I think it's an evolving form, obviously, like everything else. But in Palestine today, and from what I know, from what I follow, and people that I talk to, like people from Al-Funun, there are the very, like, traditional dal'ona line dance, which is, I think, will always be popular and personally have special love for. But then there is larger kind of dance movement that's branches of Dabke.
I like how you talk about this as an evolution, in a sense, that dance evolves, which goes back to the language and to resistance, to the different aspects that all evolve together. Okay, I guess the last question is, what is next for you? I know you're performing at the Arab American National Museum. Probably the interview will be up after you've done that. But still, I mean, do you have any plans for the future you'd like to share with us as a group or individually?
Our immediate plans is to find the best kanafi shop in Detroit. But I think so. We do have a full program for this week. We'll be meeting with the local Dabke group. It's gonna be a fun experience. We're gonna rehearse with them, teach them a couple of our dances, and perform them. And we're going to do a few workshops. But the future, no clear answer for me yet. I think we're really excited about continuing to evolve. We are at an exciting time. We have like a big number of new recruits that we're developing, but the future is still open, and I think Yasmin has a plan.
Yes, we're always scheming about how to level up, how to continue to share our beautiful dance and tradition with our community. One of the things that folks have constantly been asking us for is a kids Dabke group. Mm-hmm. So being able to do that would be awesome. There are like logistical constraints to why we haven't done that yet, but doing that in the future would be great. And then we've never done a full-length show on our own. We've always been invited to different venues, or specifically we love performing in schools and cultural centers. Like, education is a big part of like the purpose of our group. We made a decision not to perform at weddings. We only perform at community events, cultural events, schools, because we don't see our primary purpose in terms of like financial income. We see it as how can we culturally enrich our community. So we've never done a full-length production with like a narrative and a story. We're always invited to places to perform. So being able to do a full-length show would be awesome.
All right. I guess this is it for our interview, and I want to thank you all. And it was a pleasure and a privilege to meet you. And I'm sure we'll be seeing you again. Thank you. Thank you. This week's episode was hosted by Wissam El-Maliki. It was produced and edited by Muhammad Jafar. Our theme song was composed by Isra Darwish, and our logo was designed by Maysara Abdelhaq. Jeem is brought to you by the Center for Arab American Studies at the University of Michigan Dearborn and the Arab American National Museum. It is funded by the University of Michigan Arts Initiative and the Center for Arab American Studies at the University of Michigan Dearborn. Check our website, scenejeempodcast.com, for more info on our guests. Thank you for listening.